Coming to you direct from the nerve center of the galaxy's greatest comic. This is the 2000 AD Thrillcast.
Borag Thung, Earthlets, and welcome to the 2000 AD Thrillcast. I'm your host, Molch-R. We're here for another lockdown tape. This time we've got Patrick Goddard, who's the artist on Aquila, also very well known for his stuff on Savage and Judge Dredd and the Sniper Elite comic. And then we go on another deep dive, this time Brothers of the Blood, the Judge Dredd collection from a few years ago. Comics critic Tom Shapira got on the line to chat away about this. Absolutely fascinating. He also talks a little bit about his book that's coming out soon, all about Judge Dredd and the very first episode, which very much looking forward to getting a hold of a copy of. In the meantime, hope you're staying safe. Hope you're staying well. Things continue to be uncertain. We continue with 2000 AD and the magazine. Lots of offers on at the moment. We're sort of keeping the thrill power levels high. Go along to 2000ad.com/news or sign up to the 2000 AD Thrill Mail at 2000ad.com/newsletter to get all the latest news about what's happening and any updates during these difficult times. One thing that is coming up this month, and happy May by the way, is the Smash Special, which brings together some of those classic British characters from our archive. Steel Claw, Mytek the Mighty, Johnny Future. It's absolutely packed with stuff. And you've got some top talent on there. Charlie Adlard, Walking Dead. Charlie Higson, The Fast Show. I mean, that's worth the price of entry alone, surely. But also we've got people like Chris Weston, Rob Williams, so many others, and that's coming out at the end of May. That's not going to be available through the newsagents, unfortunately. It's going to be only through our web shop, so make sure you head along to shop.2000ad.com and reserve your copy to make sure that you get it when it comes out on the 20-something of May. I'm not going to look that up right now. One take. So yes, we're going to plough on with the 2000 AD Thrillcast. Like I said, we talked first to Patrick Goddard, the artist on Aquila, and then Tom Shapira. So, yeah, another long one. Hope you're enjoying these podcasts. Do let us know what you think. We've been getting some really lovely feedback from listeners over the last little while. Not even just suggesting things they want to listen to, just saying thanks for upping the frequency of the episodes. And thank you to everybody who tunes in and helps spread the word about these. If you want to get in touch, thrillcast at 2000ad.com. That's thrillcast, all one word, at 2000ad.com. If you've got a suggestion for a future episode, a theme, somebody you want us to interview, doesn't necessarily even have to be somebody who has worked for 2000 AD. If they've been influenced by it, if they've professed a great love for 2000 AD, then yeah, let us know what you think. So we're going to plough on now and talk to Patrick Goddard, artist on Aquila. You've been the artist on Aquila for a while now, taking over from Lee Gallagher. Tell us just a little bit about your just went all horrid. Tell us a little bit about your time on the strip and you know how you came to be working on it in the first place.
Originally, it was I think I was just stepping in for like a fill-in couple of episodes when Lee. I can't remember what he was working on. He might have been finishing off Defoe. And I'm not sure, one thing overran or they just needed Aquila to fit in somewhere. And I think Gordon had, like, I think it was only a 5-episode thing. And I did that one. And that seemed to do well. And then Matt asked me if I wanted to do this one, which, do they know how many episodes it is? Am I allowed to say?
Yeah, you can absolutely say that.
I think it's eight episodes, so it's almost finished. And then... hopefully I'll be doing the next one after that as well. So,
what is it about the character? Because he started off, and Gordon's kind of batted this aside a little bit because people noticed the parallels to Black Hawk, which was the old series. What is it about the character that appeals to you?
I think visually he's great fun to draw because he's like a big hulking character where most of the time I'm drawing people in suits or like other sort of outfits, and and it's just nice to sort of draw just some larger than life character. And I do like the supporting cast in there as well, so they're sort of good fun. But it's just, the reference can kill you now and again. I remember going between Savage with lots of reference, then Aquila, then lots of reference, and I was just pleading to Matt. I said, let me draw Dredd, I can make stuff up. But it's, it's good. If I can get the reference right, I think it really adds to it. So
I remember very vividly Lee talking about Aquila and how he went from Defoe to doing Defoe and Aquila at the same time. Lots and lots of reference. And I think he had to redraw an entire episode because he got the Roman shields wrong.
Oh, I've been lucky so far, but I think in the first time I drew Aquila, I drew the Colosseum in the background. And then Gordon sent me an email saying it wasn't built for another 50 years. And I had to just, old school wiped it out. And I thought, really? I'd say who would know, but people would know. So I've been lucky so far with the outfits, but, I'm trying to get it right. I know I'm not getting a spot on, and there's a bit of artistic license. It is a fantasy in the end-ish.
Well, I think when you're dealing with the unkillable sort of avatar of a demon god, you kind of you think you give it a license. How involved is Gordon in this? Is he are you batting things back and forth, or is he just checking things over when you're done?
I think all the scripts were done before I started it, so that was all pretty well sorted. And I've offered to sort of send the pages to him, but after I'm done, and he's happy just to see him published for the first time in the prog. He said, oh no, don't worry. He said, because it's been months since he's written it. He said he's almost seen it fresh again. And, he's probably busy. But he seemed pleased so far. So.
You mentioned that you'd been working on Savage, which is the Pat Mills kind of reboot continuation of Invasion, and on that you followed Charlie Adlard, who'd done a few books of that. What was it? What was the contrast between those two strips like, where you're going from a very contemporary setting to a very historical one?
I think there was a lot more sort of the reference for Savage, which was available. I could sort of get a lot of real world sort of elements right with the historical Roman stuff. There's only so much I can find, and then I'm sort of I've probably got some Greek influences in there rather than the Roman influences. Just getting like costumes and architecture, and some days you just got to get the thing drawn, and you think, I could spend a month researching this, but you just don't have the time. With Pat, to be fair, he used to send me a lot of reference. If there's anything specific, like a building, weaponry, anything like that, I'd have it. I'd have like pages of the stuff in my inbox. He's always, pretty good that way.
Do you have an interest in history?
Sort of. I'm not overly sort of. I like sort of looking at it as trying to learn from your mistakes of history. But I probably prefer more 20th century history. But I don't mind the medieval things and the Romans, but I'm not nowhere near an expert. I've had people comment on some of my things already. I'm like, okay, I'm doing my best. If I got the wrong bracelets or the wrong uniform or the wrong skirt, don't lynch me. Or crucify me, rather.
Just coming up to that contrast between the two strips, are there many styles that can adapt between kind of contemporary? But did you have to adapt your style to deal with historical setting, or was it just kind of natural? Just, well, this is action, this is scenery, etc., etc.
Yeah, I didn't have to adapt it too much. I think with Savage, I actually drew it in a certain way that I wanted things at eye level. I didn't want to do anything too dynamic. where with Aquila, sort of flex your sort of dynamic muscles a little bit, so you can do sort of a few more extreme, camera angles and things like that, and because there's a lot of extreme depths in it, so you got to think of like creative ways of actually drawing them then, and it's colored, so that's the only thing I really find a difference. I can sort of almost leave things with Savage. I thought, I need to render this, I need to possibly black this in, but now that I think Pippa's doing a good job on it. So,
well, Pippa's quite a new colorist for 2000 AD.
Yeah.
How have you found her color has evolved over the course of the strip? Is she getting? Did she come in with a very clear vision of what she wanted to do?
She sent me some messages beforehand saying if there's anything specific I wanted, and there wasn't too much. I thought I can trust her. I worked with her on the Judge Anderson thing recently, but she's just, I've only got most of the progs this week, so I literally only had the first one, and then I've got, I think, 5 this week. So I've just been catching up on it myself, and she's doing a great job. It seems to sort of, I think Gary Caldwell, I think, coloured my last one, and there's a similarity of like purples and night scenes they do. But yeah, I think she's growing from strength to strength doing it, and I'm pleased how it's turned out.
What concessions do you as an artist give to colorists? Is it a case of just kind of trusting them and cracking on kind of thing?
Yeah, it's usually just to trust them. I think I've got enough issues just learning to draw and ink, let alone thinking about the colour. And then you chat to someone like Dylan Teague, and he'll just ignore anything and colour it the way he wants to colour it. And so I see more colourists like that anyway, so it saves my job. But yeah, if there's anything really specific, it's like, I think I've mentioned add more blood. Gordon writes more blood, so so things like that. But yeah, it's going smoothly as possible at the moment. So.
Take us through your process in crafting a page, because what's been interesting talking to artists for the podcast over the years is the similarities and the differences in how people approach page layouts, the process. Where do you start?
I just start with the script and the thumbnail sketching first. So that's current. You probably can't see it there, but I usually have an A4 sheet of paper with about 10, 12 panels on there. And then I'll just like try and work on all the storytelling to that. I find when I was drawing Sniper Elite, there was about 3-4 panel pages. So I found a habit of drawing the pages out on A4 first, and then blowing them up on my photocopier to A3, and then sort of tracing them off. But if it's like a 6-7 panel page, I just draw straight onto the art page in pencil, and then get to ink it. I'm a slow inker. I can draw a page fairly quickly, but I think it's more of a either confidence or fear thing with inking. You make a mistake, there's no click undo. So, I can add a push. I can probably pencil a page by lunchtime, but it'll take me just as long to sort of ink a page, if not longer, just because I probably second guess myself constantly. So I manage about 3 pages a week, I think. Unless it's too crazy.
But so, just on that point, have you ever thought about going digital on the inking?
I have done, but I just don't like the connect, or the disconnect rather. I've got an iPad Pro. I like the iPencil, but I still prefer to draw on paper and then scan it in and maybe colour it. Or even with like the inking brushes and the pens on it, it's just not the same as having it in your hand. Plus, nobody can buy the original artwork then. But there are times where I see some amazing digital artwork, and I just think, wish I could do that. But we'll see. Maybe one day.
Well, I was going to ask if you're ever tempted, because it quite a few artists I know who now work fully digitally kind of went through exactly that same thought process where it doesn't quite feel the same, and now they're kind of
I see people like PJ. He's always drifting between the two. Some days he's traditional. Other days he's digital, you know. And I obviously see Dylan a lot, and I see what he's doing, and just it's amazing. And you think, oh, maybe one day, but I don't know. I still like the drawing part on the paper. I can just feel it better. But yeah.
I'm not sure we want to emulate Dylan. I mean, that's the man who used to do full pencils at what, A5?
Yeah, true. I remember seeing some of his work. He goes with thumbnails, A5 sketch, A4 sketch, A3 pencil pages, and I thought, you've drawn it about 7 times. No wonder you can't draw so much.
He likes his colour. He likes his
He
colour,
does.
and that's fine.
He's just done a Dredd cover recently for me.
Yeah.
I haven't quite seen it yet, but he was happy to do that. He said it only took him a few hours. So.
Well, I mean, it's good that you came on to talk about Dylan, because I've always seen you, and don't take this the wrong way, as part of the Welsh Mafia. So there's Mike Collins and whatnot. There seems to be a little clique of you around that kind of, because you're Cardiff way, aren't you?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
I mean, did you all just naturally gravitate towards one another?
When I started at 2000 AD, Dave Bishop put me into contact with Dylan. He said, there's another person that will, because I submitted just to be a penciler. And then he said, you got somebody who can ink, and he's too slow to draw himself. So, and he's in Cardiff. So, and I got to meet him then, and he's just become good friends since. And then he seemed to know everyone in the industry. So he's a good fella to sort of hang around, because he'll introduce everyone. You know, then he'll tell you the truth behind what he thinks of them afterwards. So so he's had a good upbringing, because he went into a studio with Dave Roach and Mike Collins at a young age. So he had a good head start there. But it was just one of those things. Dave Bishop put us together. So.
And how did that sort of first approach to 2000 AD begin? Because I kind of took notice of your stuff when in that kind of Dave Bishop era.
Yeah, I sort of, what was it? I did a couple of Sinister Dexters first, but then Dave Bishop took over the Meg, and Andy Diggle took over 2000 AD, and then Bishop sort of kept using me for the odd little strip here and there. I think I did some Mean Machine. Or Young Midden Face and things like that. And I did War Dog for the Rebellion strip, which was like 10 months in the magazine, so that was quite good. But it was just, you know, you put me and Dylan together, we worked quite well, and that was it, really. It was just, you know, there was one instance I always regret. I think Andy wanted me to draw a Dredd for 2000 AD, but Dave had me doing something else for the magazine, and I couldn't do it. I thought, that would have been my first Dredd in the prog, and I kind of missed out. I did it later on, but you know, I didn't get a chance to work with Andy too often at all, so I was kind of a bit disappointed about that. But it seemed to be they were in two different, because I suppose they worked separately, different parts of the country at the time. Because I think Dave was up in Scotland still, and I think Andy was in Oxford at the time. I don't know, but they were both in charge of their own sort of productions, and they wouldn't share.
Well, your time at 2000 AD has been interesting, because you've almost been one of the stalwarts. You know, you regularly pop up. It's on different strips. Like you say, you've done a bit of Sinister Dexter. You did Savage. You did you're doing Aquila. You've done Dredd. How have you seen? What's been your perspective on your time at 2000 AD?
Weirdly, I'm fill-in artist at the moment on some other strips, so I think I'm sort of a jack of all trades, master of none. So. You know, I think Savage was the only one I think I felt really comfortable working. Sort of, I didn't have to worry. You know, when you draw a Dredd, you think, there's such a history to Dredd. You always feel a bit conscious about not screwing it up. But with Savage, I could always jump straight in and sort of felt quite comfortable drawing it. And you know what was expected. But I think for the most part, I think I'm solid. I sort of, you know, I hit my deadlines So they seem to be happy for the most part, but nobody's screaming about it, I think, generally.
You'd be surprised how reliable and able to hit deadlines is like gold dust in
Good to hear. Long may it continue then.
Well, let's talk about your Dredd, because you've done various stories on that. I guess. Well, actually, no. Let's approach it in a different way. Are you one of those artists who always wanted to draw for 2000 AD? Is 2000 AD the thing that inspired you to become a comic book artist, or was it a different route?
It was probably a different route mainly, and then I thought because it was a British publication, I thought I'd give it a go. Because I think in the 90s you'd have to send your samples to America, photocopies, and you could spend 3 to 6 months, if ever, to hear anything back. So, and when you're sort of 18, 19, it was a long time to wait. And then you think, I end up going to art college instead. And then after art college, I thought, the one thing they never teach you in college is how to make a living at anything. So, and I thought, illustration was it was a non-starter for me pretty much. But I thought with comics, you get sort of, 6 months work, and you get if you get able to draw like lots of strips, you sort of, rather than just doing a week here and a week there, you sort of get months of work. So I decided to give 2000 AD a go then. So, I was aware of it from a young age, and I was more aware of it by the time I was in sixth form in school, because all my friends were sort of into the Bisleys. But by then I was sort of a bit brainwashed with a bit of Marvel, DC. But my first comics was Battle Action Force and Star Wars Weekly. So I think that's where most of my understanding of drawing is. I used to love Al Williamson, and Vanyo were probably a battle artist. So, when I did Savage, I looked at a lot of old battle comics just to pick up on how well they drew in black and white. And that intimidated me. But no, I thought I'd give, it was the end of the 90s, and I thought I'd give 2000 AD a go, because I noticed they were drifting away from a lot of the painterly artists, where if I wasn't a painter, so I wasn't really going to apply for 2000 AD. But then I thought, like, Simon Fraser was there. There was a few, Arthur Ransom I know he's painted, but he was sort of quite pen and ink artwork as well. And there was a few other new ones getting introduced at the time. So I thought, I'll give them a go. And Dave Bishop liked it. I got in.
And I mean, you've mentioned a few influences there. What would you say are your artistic influences on your style? Because I've always thought of your style as solid. Like, there's clear parameters, and it doesn't really it doesn't necessarily stray outside of those. What do you plot as because I see a bit of Bolland in there, to be honest with you. What do you think your influences are?
I think probably the biggest one is sort of my teenage years was Alan Davis, and I like his sense of storytelling. And I think as a pencil or as an artist, it's my job to tell the story of this writer. So I don't like changing too many things. I don't have too crazy page layouts, because I think that my job is just to tell the story as clearly as possibly. And I've picked up a lot of European books in recent years, and I like that style of storytelling. But I think Alan Davis, I like the John Buscema, and Bolland. If I could mesh Bolland and Jock as a Dredd artist, that's I like Bolland's rendering, but I like Jock's sort of energy and his Dredd's presence that he draws. But with Dredd, always sort of get used to drawing him at the end of the strip. And, I think, one day I'll have to do a 10-parter, just when you're only doing 2-3 parters. And, Dredd sometimes only features in a couple of pages as well. So you think, so you just finally warm up to him, and then he's gone. He's gone just like that.
Coming back to what you're saying about being a penciler, and when Dave put you in touch with Dylan because you were looking for an inker. It's rare in British comics for somebody just to be a penciler. Did you have your eye on the American market, even though you were conscious of a lack of opportunities, perhaps?
Yeah, I don't know. I think I prefer to pencil. I think that's what I enjoy most. And I just assumed that's what even British comics were like. They'd have inkers there, but it was. I don't know. I just thought I'd be quicker. If I ever did an American comic, I'd have to draw 20, 22 pages in a month. And so I was always working on trying to be faster that way. So I never thought about inking my own work until, much later. So, possibly looking back, I thought, okay, maybe I'll draw American comics. But I just assumed all comics is sort of, even some European ones had inkers. So I just assumed that was the way it was. But you're right, there weren't that many inkers. I think Lee Townsend inked me a few times. But it was only, I think Dave Roach filled in a few days when Dylan was having a breakdown. So I don't think he's even credited Dave in the prog. But it was just one of those things, and I ended up deciding to ink my own work eventually.
And in terms of how you see your style of evolving, because you've been working for 2000 AD for over 20 years.
Yeah.
How do you feel you've changed?
I think Savage was a turning point, just because it made me, because it was in black and white, and I think most of my stuff up until then was probably in colour, and it just made me more aware of spotting blacks and trying to get form more that way. But I think that was the turning point in how I draw and how I look, and even how I look at some of my favourite artists now, like John Paul Leon, and you start looking at the Alex Toth and things like that, just how they use black to build their compositions that way. I still over render a lot, but maybe one day I could sort of pencil ink a page a day, but I can't see that happening anytime soon.
When you're dealing in black and white artwork, as you say, the control of the blacks, the where you put the blocks of black is so important. But I can't remember, was it Dave Gibbons who basically I think taught Mick McMahon that you can just fill in the blacks first, and then you don't have to. If you fill in the blacks first, you don't have to do all of the lines that go up to those things. I mean, what tricks of the trade have you picked up over the years in doing that?
I think the one, I can't remember who said it. I was, if in doubt, black it out, because because you look at the pages when they're sort of A3 size or bigger, they're going to get reduced, but you still think, that detail's going to be there. But then you see it printed, you think, I should have just blacked it out. I should have just, it works that way. I think I used to think every panel needed like 3-point perspective when I started, and everything had to be drawn. But then you think, oh no, it just has to tell the story. So a simple silhouette can work in this panel as long as it tells the story. Each panel could be amazing. It just has to work. So I think that's my feeling nowadays. But it's finished, not perfect. That's what they say.
Well, the screensaver on my phone, it literally says "done is better than perfect." So that's how things roll. On that point, talking about storytelling, with and you mentioned it earlier, with strips like Savage and with Aquila, you're dealing with fantastical settings. You're dealing with extreme action. What are the secrets for you for good storytelling in a comic like 2000 AD?
I think is the one great thing about 2000 AD is to draw like a strip in 5-6 pages. You haven't got room to sort of mess around. You've got to put it all down on those 5-6 pages and get it done. And I think that sort of taught me a lot from the old, like when you read comics in the 90s, the Image era, when they had 3-panel pages, every page a splash page. Rubbish storytelling, but people were buying them in their thousands. But with, I'd like, I just think with the 5-6 pages format, I think it really trains you how to sort of get all the information down on paper the best you can, and it kind of prepares you for doing longer strips then. But I forgot what the question was now.
the key to storytelling.
As key goes, with, I don't know, with you just got to mix up your angles. I think you don't want to keep it boring, so you don't want to keep all the same long shots, mid shots, head shots. Just especially with the sort of some of the action scenes, you just that's the one good thing with the drawing Aquila is just you can just let loose and just draw heads being decapitated and a big hulking naked guy, which I'm glad they used some strategic word balloons in the recent episode. But it's it's just you just sort of let your creative muscles flex a little bit. But it's just I think you just picture it in your head and just put it on a paper. I thought everyone can do it.
Wait, who was I talking to? Oh, it was Bolland. I interviewed Bolland the other day, and I said, some artists start making a mark on the page, and that tells them how the image is going to be. Others start with the image in their head. Others have a rough idea. I guess what you're saying is it's just the thing is there, and you're just putting it on the page.
Yeah, it's like sometimes having all the dialogue dictates the composition. I find with me. If there's like 2-3 people talking, you got to fit the word balloons in. So I might have thought a better shot, but it just won't work. Just, physically won't work. But I'll always remember Henry Flint's answer. I was on a panel with him once, and he said, "Oh yeah, I read the script, then I read it again, then I have a cup of tea, then I have a lie down and have a nap." And then I think that's when his brain gets wired into another universe. And then that's how he just pours out his imagination. But it was just everyone else was talking about thumbnails, sketching ideas. Henry was just, okay, that's your answer.
In that respect, do you find it a workmanlike process?
A little bit, I think my style is a bit probably workmanlike, but I do enjoy the initial, trying to visualize the words into pictures. I do like trying to think of interesting ways and sometimes challenging ways of actually drawing it. But I think for the most part, it's just, you just need to get on with it. I'm always, as comic artists, you're always aware of the time. You're just thinking it needs to be done. And then you think, okay, that'll work. There are times where I might leave something in my thumbnails to hope that I might get inspiration in a couple of days' time, and I think, I'll quickly draw that down. I'll leave something and go back to it. But I've just been told, even if you draw on a panel and think up a better one, there's no point redrawing it, because you probably have to draw that same panel again in the future. So save that better idea for the future. So, and I know artists who just keep redrawing things. I think I've done it now and again, but for that I think, okay, I'll do it better next time if Matt employs me.
Well, I mean, this is the thing that comic book art is it's an industry.
Yeah,
it is a job. It's I have friends who are quote unquote proper artists, and some of them take forever to do anything, and they're very poor. But when there's deadlines, and coming back to that whole kind of, you've got to be reliable. It is a process. I mean, I guess there are days, as you say, when it's just not clicking.
Yeah.
How do you overcome artist block, for want of a better phrase?
I think for the most part, it's sort of, because at the moment I've got a house full, 2 young children and the wife. And it just keeps you grounded, and you just need to take a step back, I think, for the most part, and then look at it again. I've got a room full of books if I ever need any inspiration half the time. So you just sort of force your way through it, or you just got to I just find it's just going to, as you say, it's a job and it needs doing, and people hopefully will sit there and enjoy it, but for the most part, they'll look at it, put it to one side, and then that's it, and move on to the next one. So it's, each page isn't going to be like a work of art that's going to be hung up. And, I don't, they shouldn't really be treated that way for the most part. So,
I mean, some artists do that. They've got one eye on the resale market.
Yeah.
Which I always find really. Sometimes it's notable, sometimes it's not.
Yeah.
Particularly with American artists, like you get to a double page spread and they go, "Oh, that's going on someone's wall for a few $1,000s,"
Exactly. And it might not even tell the story in a proper way either, and that's it. But
one or two speech balloons sort of dotted around. I want to bring things back to talking about Aquila, because something you mentioned earlier was the kind of cast of characters that go with it. And when you're doing a strip that is, even though it is a fantastical series, is set in a historical period, how much latitude do you kind of feel you have when creating ancillary characters?
Gordon's pretty good. He sort of, he gives you a good description of what he likes, and I say you just go for it. And I've offered, I've sent pictures to him in the past of like different characters, but yeah, you want to sort of try and think of something different for what's gone before, which is incredibly hard for the most part. But there's times where I think I've drawn like the half skin naked guy. About halfway through drawing him, I kind of wish I made him more of an old style Hulk, not so muscly, but more of a solid, not overweight, but just a bulk of a person. But I started drawing him quite ripped, so I thought I had to continue that anyway. But it's one of those things when you hit me about 3 episodes in or a few months in, and I just thought, I wish I drew him this way now. But it's good to sort of just try and think of different ways of Matt doesn't bother you when about what direction you're going to take him in, but for the most part it's just left to me, and which is a great working relationship.
This is something that's cropped up before, is how 2000 AD and Matt, they do afford creators an awful lot of kind of latitude and kind of leave you alone to get on with it. Is that one of the benefits for you of working for somewhere like 2000 AD?
Absolutely, it is. It's probably the best sort of working relationship I've done in all fields. I did some pages for Marvel years ago, and it was I think I had the editor, the assistant editor, the assistant editor, even the editor's dog emailing me every day, just seeing how you're getting on. I'm getting on fine, just leave me alone. But Rebellion is Matt looks after you, he gives you the praise when you need it. You get paid on time, which is great, and it's probably the best working relationship. I've done stuff for illustration work and BBC, but Rebellion have been by far the best.
That's what we like to hear. And with the current Aquila series, take us through it. Take us through the story, and are there any particular points in this where you felt it's stretched your style, or it's presented a certain challenge to you?
Looking through the recent episodes, I wish I took more time to do around the lake, where in my head I imagined it a bit more spooky looking. Pippa's done great colours, so it makes it look good for me. But I did wonder about having the head sewn onto the shoulder. How I thought it was going to be one of those Judge Dredd moments where Dredd can't move his arms in certain ways, and I thought, will Aquila be the same? And then how first person on the left generally speaks first. How does that work when you're sort of composing the panels? But that was fine. There was trying to get reference on the city. I'm not sure how much I can say. Was pretty tough because most of the reference is kind of ruins. So I found some like 3D renders of what these cities used to look like, and that was quite helpful. But and it's going into the final episode, it will be interesting to see what I can play with there, because I enjoy drawing the last page, shall I say, or last 2 pages, which I got to sort of have a bit of fun with.
Interesting point you made just there about Dredd shoulder pads. When you have a slightly more, for want of a better phrase, realistic style like yours, how do you overcome things like this? Because I'm always fascinated by how artists overcome the inherent ridiculousness of Dredd's costume, and particularly things like when he raises his arms to fly.
There's times where I've drawn a figure and I think, oh, that's great, and then I realise it won't work. His shoulders or his eagle will get in the way. And I have seen, I won't name him, but I've seen an artist drawn Dredd falling, arms out wide, but he's drawn the pads flat. So you just have these 2 floating gloves. And I just thought, I have told him, but yeah, there's times I've sort of struggled with Dredd the odd time, just because I always draw his face under the helmet to make sure I get his eye line correct with his visor, and some don't. And I think the one thing I would like to change on Dredd is probably have a side holster, because there's times where they say Dredd draws his gun, and it's in his boot again. It's in his damn boot. So you have to sort of change what you were sort of originally thinking about somebody looking cool drawing a gun. He's got to go on one knee now, and things like that. But I always remember reading about Carlos, how it is quite helpful at times. So if you don't like drawing elbows and knees, I think he said in an early interview, he said he had trouble when he was drawing in his early years, and he said that's why he put the pads on, and he said, hides it. So thank God for that.
I see when it was like a little eagle perched on his shoulder, not too bad. But then Mick comes along, and all those pads get bigger and bigger and bigger. And then Jock comes along, and they get even bigger. Just, madness! Absolute madness. Yeah. In terms of where you want to go as an artist, you've done stuff on Savage, done stuff on Dredd, done stuff on Aquila. Where do you want to go? What's the kind of, are you moving towards a certain style that you want to achieve, or are you happy with what you have?
I still sort of want to evolve drawing wise, but I think I'm old enough now just to be happy just to draw I just enjoy drawing, and the subject matter doesn't really sort of matter too much, but I still want to improve all the time how I draw figures, compositions, storytelling, definitely my inking, but it's like 20 years ago I probably had ambitions to draw certain things. Now it's not so much. I just enjoy the sake of drawing. Sounds a bit weird, but it's just a great thing. I'll never have the same day twice. I'll draw something different every day, and that's fantastic to do.
Do you still have aspirations to work more in America?
Not so much. There are probably things like, you wish one day you could draw Batman, one day to draw. I love to draw Captain Britain because Alan Davis is a big influence. But it's not a burning ambition anymore. Now I'm just, you'd like to create your own thing one day, but whether, you'd have to think of it first half the time, or develop it. And for the most part, you're just constantly drawing. And then if you're not drawing, you're sort of cutting the grass or doing something DIY in the house. So I don't know how some people fit it all in, to be honest. But yeah, it's, I've looked at a lot of the European books. I like to see how they've been published. And, I've seen some, I had some lovely Dutch translation of Sniper Elite. And it's just the way they look after the comic books, and then they're not sort of, not mistreated, but they just they sort of, I don't know, appreciated a little more rather than look down on half the time. It's like most people, my friends, you think, oh, I draw Judge Dredd. That's possibly the only character they might know that I draw. But I'll basically always get, Paddy's just colouring in. He's just colouring in, he is. I don't even colour. That's the worst thing about it. But they think I'm at home with crayons and felt pens every day. So that keeps me grounded.
Oh, amazing. What else are friends for?
Yeah, I know. No, I'd love to do a long version Dredd, like a 10, 15 part or something like that. That'd be quite nice. Just sort of, you can say, oh, that was just my little portion of Dredd. There's most of the, I think, Dredds I've done, only a couple of episodes here and there. So that would be quite nice to do one day. That's probably one of the only ones, and possibly create my own idea maybe one day. But time's against me now. I'm getting old, so that's a scary thing. In my head, I think I'll say, "Oh yeah, I'm sort of 20-something. Still, I'm, let's go for it." And then your body's telling you no. Then you can't work through the night because you got kids, and you got to get up in the morning. It's very real. It's not what I thought it would be like when I was 16.
Well, I always come back to the whole Ron Smith thing. It's a 9-to-5 job, and you have the egg timer or whatever it was on the drawing board, and when it's done, it's done. There's kind of no way around that. But, I mean, that's interesting because it's, as you say, it's odd to look at the amount of time you've been at 2000 AD. And like I said, it's been over 20 years now.
Yeah.
In my head, 1999 is still like 5 years ago.
Exactly.
Looking back at the time, it's interesting you mentioned the Sniper Elite comic there as well. Yet again, something that needs an awful lot of reference. So perhaps you're just our reference go-to guy.
Yeah. Well, Keith was very helpful there as well. But no, I really enjoyed it because I enjoyed Battle. It did have a huge buzz to see the little logo when it got printed, and I got to show Carlos my Rat Pack because he was showing the cover that he did for it as well. And he was like a little kid drawing it again. He was so excited drawing the Rat Pack. He was like this, he had his phone out. Look what I got to draw again. And I said, that's the comic I'm drawing. So that was good. And I like to do more Battle if it ever comes about again, because I don't know, it's just I do enjoy a bit of grounded realism in the comics, but there are days where you wish you can just do a lovely science fiction, make it all up.
You sort of say, you'd love to do like a create your own thing, but you're not afraid you kind of get to go, I can do what I want now. I don't know what I want to do.
Yeah.
Is the reference for this?
I know. That's one of the things I could never have been a fine artist. If somebody gave me a blank canvas to draw anything I want or paint anything I want, I wouldn't know where to start. I need sort of parameters or a brief of give me a starting point and I can do it. I've done lots of illustration for companies, and basically they can't afford the artists they want, so they sort of contact me and say, can you draw it in this style? And and pay me about a fifth of the price. So I've done that a lot of times in my career.
The wonderful world of illustration.
Yeah.
But yeah, looking back on your time at 2000 AD, you say you'd like a kind of solid Dredd to be able to call your own, but I guess there's, like I said, there's the word stalwart. You've been a trooper. You've been the person who's stepped up and done it. I mean, seems an odd question. Are you happy with that? Are you happy that that's how things have evolved?
Yeah. You know, I feel quite lucky. Sort of, I've been able to stick at it as long as I have. Road Trooper is another one I'd like to draw one day. You know, it just because, you know, I don't know what's happening with him history-wise or whatever. Okay, but he's something that I'd like to draw one day. I remember chatting with Stas Johnson about it once years ago, and I was quite envious he was drawing that. But I think I could sort of, my style would work with him. It wouldn't work with Nemesis. That would never work. But it's sort of, you know, as you said, the 90s didn't seem that long ago. In my head, I still think I'm in my 20s, so I still think I've got 50 years ahead of me. So I've got plenty of time to play. Whether that's true or not is another thing.
I mean, yeah. Let's not go down that particular dark rabbit hole there.
Yeah.
But as I mean, with Aquila, I guess, sort of bringing it back round. There's so much to get your teeth into with a strip like that, really, isn't there? You know, you've got the reference, which can be a little bit onerous, but there's plenty to. I mean, this sounds like such an anodyne thing to say, but keep you occupied. Yeah,
I think the script is so tight. Gordon's done, and it's just everything that needs to be there is there, and you know, it's probably you know, one of the most enjoyable kind of ones I've had to do, just because it was, you know, it made it easier to visualize it. You know, there's some strips you find you get and you think, oh, how they, you know, they're obviously thinking in a different way than you. And then you get other writers and sort of, you know, Wagner's good. He tells you everything you need to know. And, you know, you just get on with it, and everything's there from like A, B, and it's just, you can just join the dots. And it's been one of those jobs. It's just, I knew I could, you know, get the script, do the thumbnails fairly quickly, just because it was all sort of there. And just, and I just think every episode is just long enough, because I think they're only 5 pages, aren't they? They're not 6. And it's just in nice little bite size, and it works as the complete thing as well. And no, I think he's done a good job. He's not a bad writer, is he?
He's all right, I guess. Following on from Lee Gallagher, because you're both in a kind of, your artwork isn't necessarily similar, but you're in the same kind of ballpark. Yeah. Was there anything that you drew from what Lee had already done with the character and with the series that informed the way that you approached it?
Not really. It's like, he sent me a lot of his sketches at the beginning, so, you know, just, you know, try and keep his face in shadow for the most part. You know, his black eyes. You sort of get the crest on his chest a bit, or his scar on his chest. Other than that, I just think one of the great things about 2080 is just, you know, every artist are allowed to sort of not put their own stuff. It's accepted, and they accept it's the same character. You know, I got people who are non-comic fans. They all think we all have to draw Dredd the same way, and I say, look, there could be 20 different artists in 1 year all drawing Dredd, and you know. They all think they copy each other. I say, no, you don't. You don't have to. And, you know, if there's another artist, you know, on Aquila after me, you know, they'll have their version of it. And I think you can always recognize the characters anyway. So I think anything else, just go with it. And, you know, and Lee knows I'm a better artist anyway, so he's fine with it.
Don't be opening up vendettas on my podcast.
Sorry, couldn't resist.
Oh, brilliant, wonderful. Well, if people want to find you online, where can they seek you out?
I'm on Twitter and Instagram. Oh God, do I have to name what they are? I think my Twitter, I'm at PaddyGod1.
Nice
Instagram.
Humble Instagram, Twitter handle there.
Yeah. And what am I? And I'm PaddyG74 on Instagram. So they're my 2 public domain whereabouts. So you probably find most of my little sketches, what I'm doing presently, and well, what I can show anyway.
All right, fantastic. Oh, that's wonderful. Thank you so much for that.
No problem.
I really appreciate you taking the time.
That's okay.
Oh, thanks so much to Pat for that. Absolutely fascinating to hear about his work. Now, a book that's coming out not from us is The Lawman. This is by panel, and is written by comics critic called Tom Shapira. Now, this does a really hard dive down into the very first episode of Judge Dredd in Prog 2 back in 1977, and extrapolates outwards how that episode laid the foundation for the successful character that we know now. Tom's a big fan, tweets an awful lot about Judge Dredd on Twitter. So I got him on the line from Israel, where he's based, to chat away about Brothers of the Blood, which is a collection that came out a few years ago from Rebellion and brings together the stories about Dredd's family. So his clones, Dolman and Rico, as well as his niece, Vienna. It's really interesting to look at it in hindsight, because this was all set from before Origins came along, and it's interesting to see what Wagner has done with it. But anyway, I'm going to stop talking now and let Tom come on and talk about Brothers of the Blood Deep Dive. Well, I guess we'll start off. I want to just briefly talk about your book for Panel by Panel, which is a kind of deep dive into, well, the first 5 pages of Judge Dredd and extrapolating outwards. Do you want to tell us a little bit about it?
It came out of 2 other books. I'm going to admit, like The Great Creators of 2000 AD, of, not stealing, being inspired by previous creations. Jeff Dyer's Zona, which is one of my favorite books about cinema, which he wrote about the movie Stalker. And the whole book is him basically going minute by minute with the movie, while also digressing to any which way that catches his fancy. And I remember reading it and thinking, because I've written 1 book of comic criticism before, but after reading it, I thought, I want to do something like that. And the other thing is How to Read Nancy. And I don't remember the name of the 2 authors. It came out 2 years ago, and they wrote a whole book about a 3-panel strip, Nancy strip. And my thinking was, well, okay, if they can do that, if they can write a whole massive book about 3 panels, I can certainly write a book about 5 pages. And it had to be the 5 pages of my favorite comic, which is Judge Dredd.
It's an ambitious project, because you are, like I said, it's more than a deep dive, because you name checked How to Read Nancy there, which is 3 panels, but it's a strip that's been going on for 43 years now, and has changed and evolved and adapted and taken on different elements, different writers. Did you ever find it particularly difficult to touch on something that's happened over the last 43 years when looking at that original story, or was it a more kind of general look at the themes of Dredd?
The words flew right out of me. I was in the middle of another project for Hassan, my editor at Panel by Panel, and I was stuck in that one. So I said, okay, Judge Dredd. I really like Judge Dredd. Maybe I can do something with that. And he didn't ask for it. I just sat down and I said, okay, I'm going to write an article, not a book. I'm just going to write an article about this, because I'm interested in how that origin strip worked. And the words just kept coming and coming, and I couldn't stop. So after about a week, I'm emailing to Hassan, oh, by the way, are you interested in a book? Maybe. And you said 43 years. I'm a rather new fan for Judge Dredd and for comics overall. I got into them pretty late. And one of the reasons that I like Judge Dredd so much is because it's so long and it uses the length right. Things have meaning in Judge Dredd. And that's why it's my favorite comic strip character in the term of corporate-owned character that will exist as long as it makes money. In most of the American comics, things have meaning for a short while until they're rebooted revisioned, rethought, whatever. Judge Dredd started really early on. They decided things have meaning. And what I love about this first Judge Dredd strip is that even though the comics has changed so much, they still have to be loyal to it in a way. They can't just decide, oh, well, we're not really comfortable with that thing. My favorite strip, my favorite Judge Dredd story of all time, Letter for a Democrat. And I love it because it's so awful, because Dredd does this awful thing on the page, and the creator of the comics guarantee to you from then till this day, this is the man and this is what he does, and he will never not do this. We will never expose, oh, no, Hester Prynne was carrying a bomb and he saved people the day. No. Judge Dredd is the man who would kill your mother, you young reader of the comic. And I admire, the willingness to go with that all the way. Garth Ennis had that essay about how for him it was the Apocalypse War, the pressing of the button, request denied. And for me, that's a bit abstract because it's like the Death Star. You kill 500 million people, it's too big. But seeing him kill one person on the page, that was the gut punch, the emotional moment where I knew, oh, this is the comic to look for morally, that understands the spirit of our time.
It's fascinating to me that in those early strips, talking about the essentially we're talking about continuity. Things have a consequence beyond their immediate moment. When you look at those early strips, and this is something we'll come to talk on when we talk about the collection that we've chosen to discuss. Yeah. They were just throwing ideas at the wall. There's so many elements in those early strips that have been discarded or had to be retconned or explained away. And even down to things like which one is it? The Brotherhood one, where he goes out into the cursed earth for the first time, and in the distance, when he's heading back to the city, it almost looks like it's under a dome. Now, you can debate whether that's just a trick that the artist was using to point out the lights of the city, or, I know some young readers at the time who thought, oh, so it's like it's a city under a dome. So it's go on.
No, in the first strip they're saying, oh, New York City, and then in strip number 2 it's New York City, part of Mega City 1.
Yeah, exactly.
And of course, in the first bit, the judges are elected by the citizens, which is metaphorically true. It's like a Jedi truth. It's like, well, yeah, 50 years ago, the citizens allowed the judges to take power from the mean, evil dictator who's ruining the earth. But it's still there. They wouldn't change it. And one of the reasons that I think the first strip, Judge Whitey, is so interesting is because it's such a Frankenstein work. I think I write it in the book. Not Frankenstein 2, a Frankenstein work, because it's like 3 writers, 2 artists, 3 editors or something like that. Everyone was involved, and until the last moment, nobody knew that this would be the first strip. The Bank Raid was supposed to be
Bank Raid, yeah,
the original first one, and the one where he's executing people on the moving stairs, and they chose that one. And I don't want to pretend, oh, it's very significant. No, they made it under pressure of time, and this was the one that happened to fit best. But it works. Every single element of Judge Dredd to this day exists within these 5 pages. It's amazing. It's like synchronicity, divine intervention. I don't know why it works in a way that Bank Raid doesn't work. Maybe that's why they chose it. I don't know.
Well, let's move on to in the light of that, talking about the collection that we've chosen to focus on, which is Brothers of the Blood, which came out quite a few years ago. And God, I was speaking to Patrick Goddard a moment ago about how it still feels like 1999 was 5 years ago. So we're talking about strips from the early and mid 2000s. Now, this is a collection which has some really interesting elements. Do you want to take us through what this collection is for somebody who hasn't picked it up.
It's a collection of stories that are all related in one way or another to Dredd's family. And so we have the first story, Blood Cadets, introduces Rico 2, the other Dredd clone that came out all right. And then we have a few strips where Rico is the lead. And later we have two stories on Vienna, Dredd's niece. And talking about continuity, and they would never lie to you, and they would never erase anything. John Wagner took this character that appeared when this Vienna story came out, 30 years before that? A story that everybody said, well, we can ignore that, right? Dredd's niece doesn't make any sense because judges aren't supposed to be married, and make it work within the terms of the rules of the universe, and make it work emotionally as a new support. That's an act of writing. Give the man all the eyes. That's amazing. And then the last part of the book is Lawman, which is another Dredd clone. And I'm going to be controversial, heretic. Brothers of the Blood is my favorite Judge Dredd collection, not single story, a collection overall. And the problem with it, recommending it to other people, is that the love of it depends on knowing other Judge Dredd stories, not in terms of knowing the details, because again, Wagner does an amazing job explaining the world to you. And I read it again in preparation, I forgot. Oh, right, this Blood Cadets is like 18 pages, like 3 short chapters, and introduces to you a new character, and you set a quo for that character, and explores Dredd's relations to that character. That's again amazingly dense writing. But it depends on you understanding why Dredd, when he sees this new character, thinking clone, a younger clone. Because if you didn't read Necropolis or Oz, you could understand the technicalities of what's happening, but the emotional punch probably wouldn't be there. So it's something that should be read by people who already know the strip. That's my one issue with it. Otherwise, for me, it's just one banger after another. I love every story there, and it's an amazing work of editing of whoever chose, okay, we'll include this strip and this strip, because it's not like one ongoing story that came. Those stories, I think, some of them are really far apart, like years apart, because Dolman, when he appears for the first time, Rico is already like an old judge, like not old, but with some veteran on the streets. And it's also great art. Obviously, you've got Escara, you've got Charlie Adlard, you've got McNeil, all doing naturally superb work. I think the final story, with all 3 of them together, just standing and doing shooting, this gives me the excitement that other people get from, let's say, the end of Judgment Day, where it's Johnny and Dredd. For me, it's no, it's Dredd and Dredd and Dredd. That's a whole lot better. And then even the small moments of Dolman just saying any more for any more, and not even realizing, oh, that's Dredd's catchphrase. It's so natural to him. And can I spoil? Like, should I spoil?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, to be quite frank, if somebody hasn't read Brothers of the Blood as a collection and then comes into a deep dive podcast episode, they are going to get what's coming to them.
Again, it's the fact that Dolman experiences his day on the street, and it's exciting and it's enjoyable. And he says, I feel it. I feel it and I want it. And he ends up saying, but I'm not going to be a judge. Because you expect the story when it starts to go one way, and then halfway you say, okay, so it's the good young judge story. And it ends on a completely different path where he's saying, no, because it's so comfortable to me, I have to go. And it's one of those things that Judge Dredd does really, really well, I think, is setting you up for something comfortable and then pulling the rug underneath you. Or the same thing with Rico, when they have the Sector House stories where it's Rico on his own. And one of my tiny issues with 2000 AD, why hasn't there been more Rico strips? This is a character, or a novella or something, because this is a character that simply screams for here's his story while the other big Judge Dredd story is happening. This is what this guy was doing, knowing that he has this legacy, and this legacy is still alive at the same time, which is the most uncomfortable thing ever, probably. And at the same time, you have Dredd saying he's seeing his young self, a good judge, but someone way too strict. And when he comes to Dredd with his issues about, oh, I'm trying to just work by the laws, and those people, those judges who are active on the streets keep bending them, and Dredd is saying, well, maybe you should bend too. And Rico is saying back, you're still testing me, but we as readers know, is he testing him? Because we know by this point that Dredd has bent the rules, has, came to believe in the big lies, and he's looking at Rico. And I think one of the smart things that the strip has done over the last 15 years or so is developing all those characters. They're like legacies of Dredd, each of whom could be, the next top judge, and never, and any one of them leads to a different path, because it could be Beanie, who's really open, who wants change, and it could be Logan, who's become part of the system, or it could be Rico, who's just like Dredd, but without all those years and without the doubts, really.
Well, it's interesting what I think in this collection Wagner uses Rico for, particularly in stories like Sector House, where he's effectively exploring things from the perspective of a young Dredd, but staying in continuity. I mean, it's a hell of a trick to play, to go and tell stories from effectively that you want to tell about the character now, but from before. But introducing a character who is essentially the same character as the lead, and it's happening now in continuity, but is exploring things that that's what Dredd was like when he was younger. That we know from things he said that him and his clone brother were stood apart from all the other cadets at the Academy of Law.
He's there to give himself an advice with words. It's a version of the old, if you could go back in time and give your young self a few slaps and say, stop being such an idiot, dork, whatever. But he can't, because technically his young self is upholding the laws much better than him. He's the Dredd who hasn't been through the letter from a Democrat, who hasn't been through the revolution, through Necropolis, through the Dead Man. He's Dredd uncorrupted, which makes him both the best judge and the worst judge, because he doesn't have the issues needed to actually deal with real people. He's just like, that's the rule, that's the law, that's it.
Let's kind of go back to the beginning to a certain extent. Something that you said at the very beginning when you refer to Dredd's family. Now, just those two words technically should be an oxymoron, because all the way through the strip, Dredd has been presented not only as a loner, but as the ideal, the epitome of the concept of the warrior monk, somebody without familial ties, somebody without emotion. And it's a remarkable trick that Wagner has played, as you say, to dig out little knots of continuity from a very long time ago and spinning them into gold, effectively.
Yeah, the whole deal with Dredd, not having any relationship. I wrote an article for Shelf Dust, a very fine site for comics criticism, about whether Dredd is asexual, and it's a problem to judge because within his world there are rules saying, well, obviously you can't do that. And is it his choice? Is it something that the system forced into him? And one of the interesting things, I think, throughout the history of the strip is that over and over again, even the best judges, whose name is not Judge Dredd, sin the sin of having relationship, of loving someone else. Giant did it. Rico did it. Not to spoil for ongoing stories in the magazine, but there's another famous judge who's done it. And of course, what's her name? From the pit, sorry.
DeMarco.
DeMarco, naturally. and they're all, Dredd just keeps saying, "Oh, you're a good judge. Why do you have to do that?" So maybe Dredd is the only one. Dredd and Rico are the only ones that can actually uphold the law and being the monks of the system wants them to be, without breaking. And anyone else who tries either lives the system or just breaks the rules, which is another proof throughout the story that the system doesn't work. The whole point of Judge Dredd, I think, as a strip, is that you have this system that's saying, well, we've taken your liberty, but we've given you security. And the fact is they didn't. The judges can't save the citizens. Like the city is destroyed over and over and over again. It happened under Judge Cal, in the Apocalypse War, Necropolis, Judgment Day, and of course Day of Case. At this point, the city is what, 1/8 of the original population, I think. It started at 800 million, and now they're less than 100. They keep fumbling the ball by saying, well, we have to save the citizens. Without us, what would happen to them? And the answer is, maybe they'll die a bit less. Maybe they'll be a bit happier, but they can't. And going back to the collection and to the idea of Judge Dredd, this is someone older, who more experienced, who learned a few things. Dredd, I think, at this point, and long before this point, knows that the system is broken. He'd known it since Necropolis. But as someone who grew up within the system, he can't change it. Like he can't think of, okay, if I bring this down, what's happened after? And so he tried to raise those new versions, those new generation of judges like Beanie, who could possibly do what he can do. And I don't think it's like a plan. It's a subconscious thing, which is something I think very familiar to a lot of people in this world. We're saying, we're looking at the window outside every day and saying, oh, the system is broken. It's too violent. It's too harsh. It's too demanding. It's destructive to the environment, to the soul, to society, to everything. But yet it's like, well, if I break this, if I join the revolution or whatever, what happens next? What do I lose? Do I lose everything that helps me to define myself? And that's the thing that makes me read Judge Dredd, and at the same time makes me like very, this is the heaviest strip ever. This is, very important questions about politics and human spirituality in this day and age. Like I said, for the Comics Journal, it's the most zeitgeist comics ever. Sadly, but it is.
It's something that we've touched on with deep dives and talking with Rob Williams on the podcast. How I won't go too deep into this because this is a slight sidebar, but it's that the system presents itself as strong, but it's actually incredibly weak. It's incredibly fragile because you change it a little bit, as Dredd does in, say, Tour of Duty, and once one of the supports goes, all the others start to suddenly weaken and snap. And it is the thing about fascist and totalitarian states is that they project strength, but actually they're incredibly weak and fragile and relatively prone to disruption, which is why they have to keep such an iron grip on everything. Anyway,
2010s is Dredd falling and failing over and over again. Tour of Duty, Day of Chaos is basically like it's the Necropolis all over again. You think, okay, so he's going to save it in the last moment, and then no, it happened. Nothing you could do. Everybody dies.
Well, I want to come back to what you were saying about Dredd essentially trying to create clones of himself. I know he actually has clones of himself, but a kind of psychological clones of himself. And there's that line from Dolman at the end of Brothers of the Blood where when he says, I enjoyed that, I'm not going to be a judge. And he says, I'm not a machine. And that for me really strikes at the heart of Dredd. And this is something that Williams has touched on in Titan, is that the system is asking judges to be machines. And yet at the same time, justice to a greater or smaller extent requires some element of emotion, requires more than just the law in order, it's not just the law, it's justice. And that for me has been the theme of the last 20 years, which is where Dredd has been having to deal with the ramifications of the realization that he can say, I am the law, the law is all important. But then when he begins to grapple with the concept of justice, he realized just how unjust his system is. And Dolman for me really is the analogy for that. That when you scratch beneath the surface, the system is unjust. They're not machines. They can't be machines. And yet Dredd persists in this delusion, if you will.
Wagner played on this irony in a very fine manner recently in the new Mechanismal stories with Harvey, where the problem with Harvey was that he was too nice. Because previous machine stories are like, oh, they're killing people, which is boring. Like, it's the old Mechanismal stories are fine, but it's kind of boring. Robot goes mad, kills people. The new ones are so much better because it's robot goes bad according to Dredd being nice and doing its job better than the humans. And Dredd is like, what's going on? Why are you doing this? You must be faulty. I hate you. I hate you, good robot.
But Harvey, which one of the two of them is the perfect judge?
Harvey.
Exactly, the machine, the one who is literally a machine. And I absolutely love that. It's interesting to think of Brothers of the Blood as you say, as a curated collection, because there's quite big gaps between these stories, and sometimes I guess bringing them together in a single collection can create the impression that everything is planned with storylines, whereas to a great lesser degree, Wagner feels his way. He doesn't necessarily have a grand plan. But looking at it in terms of the lead up to Origins, which is the story where you mentioned the big lie, you have big lie number 2, which is, everything is revealed to Dredd.
Have to be forever.
Yeah, exactly. So how do you react to Brothers of the Blood in light of what came next?
The problem is that I read Origin too early. When I just started getting into Judge Dredd, I saying, "Oh, well, it's called Origins. I should read that." Probably, I think I read it before Day of Chaos or something like that. I just grabbed some collections, and Origins, when you read it just as an origin story, it's fine, but it's well executed, but it doesn't. Again, it lacks the oomph. But when you read it in the proper context, after 30 years, you're like, oh, they did that. And not to get into troubles or anything, but after 2016, I came to read it again and reappreciate it in the scenes with America burning in a different manner. And again, it's the most Judge Dredd, the most gay strip ever. It's amazing and terrible at the same time. Because when I just got into Judge Dredd, I was basically looking for something to get my teeth in academically, because I was like, I'm interested in comics. I want to write about comics from a bit more critical standpoint. Here's a long strip, something with a lot of history, and obviously that has themes in it. So I thought I could treat this in a very analytical, distant manner. And the more I read, the more I got into those characters in that world, and I found that I can't be analytic about it. That the emotion is there. Origin is a great example, because once you get into it, once you read it in context, one sentence stronger than every big explosion and every fight throughout the story. That one sentence in the end.
I want to talk about Vienna for a little while, because as you say, it's a concept that shouldn't work. Wagner spinning out this adult character who has such a complicated relationship with her uncle, and who forces Dredd to ask so many difficult questions about himself. Like, he's so awkward. He doesn't know what to do. He's feeling his way. He's effectively being a human being for the first time in a long time. Particularly when you have stories like Blood and Duty and The Satanist, which are very, very, very specifically about her and about their relationship and the echo of his brother through his life. Now, there was a Doug Walk's amazing Dread Reckoning blog. There was an
Yeah,
entire
I've
thing.
read it several
Yeah.
times.
There's an amazing thing about Brothers of the Blood, about doppelganger, Jungian doppelgangers, the idea, the light and the dark in twins. And first off, what's your take on Vienna as a character, and in terms of what Wagner does with her?
I think it's interesting as the one character that Dredd can talk back to, like emotionally, because there are other characters in the strip who are not afraid of Dredd as well. She can talk to him professionally, and Anderson is like, oh, you old so and so, whatever. Almost always women, now that I think about it, the ones that are not afraid of him. But usually, he gives as much as he gives back. Like, what, I'm the law and you're not. And with her, there's like nothing he can do emotionally. He can't shout at her. He can't like threaten her, glower. He can't do anything. So he just stand there, the most uncomfortable person ever, as it were, as she said. And it's important to have characters like this who could put your protagonist on the spot, especially if it's someone whose default position is always being the boss in whatever rooms he walk into.
I find it fascinating that Wagner made Vienna an actress, because for me that's almost poking fun at Dredd, that not only is she related to him and is a free citizen and wants to live her life and all this that and the other, but she's almost in like I know acting isn't a frivolous occupation, but for Dredd it is utterly alien. She exists in a world that is completely and utterly alien to him. She is alien to him, and yet he still feels this connection. He still feels that he has to maintain this relationship even under duress. I find the way the predicament that Wagner has placed Dredd in to be fascinating, because Dredd persists in he endures with it. He continues it. You'd think he'd be out. No, I'm not going to be your uncle. I'm just a judge.
He tries to get rid of her.
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
But especially after, you get to the end of the Satanist and he's saying, I've not been a very good uncle, but, I'm effectively here for you. It's almost odd to hear coming from that character.
Yeah, and not since the Dredd act with the talking animals. Dredd being nice. Trying to be nice, which Wagner pulls out masterfully, because it happens every, 3 times in a decade, maybe. You have your Buried My Knee, Wounded Heart, or something like that. Dredd is such a fine creation because he can be the bastard, and he can be the hero, and he can be both, dependent on the point. And he has such a long history, and therefore such a massive weight on his shoulders, and that's the one Atlas that wouldn't shrug, but he's still Atlas. He walks and people die. He marches and there are earthquakes, and he's not quite sure what to do with himself. And when it comes to family, again, this man, as far as he's concerned, family shouldn't exist because he's a judge. Judges don't have family. Yet he finds himself with more family than pretty much any other judge, at least people who live long enough to come to his position. He has, because there's another clone, right? I think there was a female one during the fallout of DFK as they introduced her. I don't recall, and Nimrod's dead, but there are others, and he knows that there are others. And it's both his family and his legacy, and the threat of, you're an old man, they're going to replace you one day. And when Dahlman decides to quit, we never get Dredd's response to it, only Rico's. And I wonder if Dredd, when he hears about it, is he saying, oh, that's terrible, waste of a judge, or is he saying, whew, one less, one less young one gunning for me? What does he think of Rico? All the time, knowing that, because all the other Dredd-like clones have gone bad, and it's both a curse and a blessing for him, because he can say, well, I'm still me, you can't replace me, because it's going to be like Rico, it's going to be the first Rico, it's going to be like Kraken, it's going to be like Nimrod. They're either going to go bad mentally or they're going to go bad physically. And here's the one who, after, when was Rico 2 introduced? 2000 or so? 20 years now, holding and is a fine judge in the manner that the system wants, not necessarily in the manner that Dredd believes anymore. And, Dredd must live with that odd conflicted fear within him.
Well, you mentioned the moment in Brothers of the Blood where there's the three of them going into a firefight, and it really struck at the time, and rereading it now, really struck me that kind of 3 ages of man notion. You've got the child, you've got the mature man, and then you've got the elderly man. Let's put it that way. Do you get the feeling that was very conscious on Wagner's part?
I haven't read enough Wagner scripts, only the ones in the script book 2008 published a few years back, because, like you said, it appears that he's the guy who writes this very much from, okay, so this is what happens now, and the scripts are very much, this is plot, this is plot B, this is the character, and that's it. It's not going to be like Alan Moore, well, the meaning of the panel is 1,000 words, right? I think that's a lot of something that Carlos probably put in there, just something that is both striking and dramatic, and at the same time kind of charged with meaning of, well, what comes next? Who's replacing who? So I really love those talking missiles, the half smarts they call them. I didn't see them again. That's such a cool idea. That missile that comes at you and like give you a warning. Oh, hello, I'm gonna kill you, kid.
But that's Pete Wagner for me. You come up with an idea, you use it once or twice, and then you'll never see it again. It's always a nice contrast alongside all the ideas that he returns to and kind of niggles away at for a long time. I wanted to touch on the notion of Rico as the dark side of Dredd, because again, this is an ancient, a Jungian archetype of the good and the evil twin. Do you think that this has been particularly fruitful for Dredd? Do you think this is something that has brought depth to the character, or is it just a continuity thing?
Oh no, certainly there's plenty in it. Again, symbolically, psychologically, philosophically, because young Rico is, as far as Dredd is concerned, he's the dark version, because he's the one who wouldn't bend even when there's some bending needed to happen. But as far as the Justice Department is concerned, this Rico is the light version, and Dredd is the one who's been compromised and gotten way too big for his breech, for his boots, as it were. Because Dredd tried to change the law in tour of duty, and Rico wouldn't do that. Rico would go with the law. So it's interesting. It utterly depends on your perspective. And I think Wagner said that he wanted to kill Dredd ages ago or something like that, and replace him with Rico. And not gonna happen. But I think it's a really interesting idea of what I thought that Every Empire Falls was a masterful use of this, because suddenly the old man is not there, and everybody's looking at you, kid, even though Rico doesn't really know what to do with it. He was just a street judge. He wasn't the judge everybody looks for, and now he is. And again, it's a very fruitful avenue, and I really want to see a script dealing with that, or again, one of those novellas that we're publishing every once in a while.
But you make a good point there about the notion of legacy. That legacy kind of cuts both ways. It is both good, and it can be both good and bad. And for all of the looking to Rico to carry the torch, he's carrying two torches, because he's not just there being Dredd, he's also there effectively undoing the reputation of the bloodline, for want of a better word, you know, he's chosen the name of Dredd's bad brother.
And he says very by the way about, oh yeah, it's a name, one as good as any. And Dredd is like, is one as good as any? What are you doing there, kid? I'm not sure.
Well, that's a very Wagnerian thing right there, kind of, you know, dismissing something that you've done. It's just a thing, but actually, you know full well it's much deeper than that. I mean, what's your take on Rico as a legacy character?
Again, he's a great invention, and he should be in the focus more, I believe, because he brings so much to the table. Because it's a compromised legacy, the readers know that there can't be another Dredd, because the strip is called Judge Dredd, not Judge Rico, not Judge Mega City 1, not Judge Dredd 2. It's called Judge Dredd. And so the readers know, but the characters don't know. And they're kind of stuck with it, that everybody has that in the back. Rico has this in the back of his head. Oh, I should replace him one day, but I can never replace him because I was never the one who defeated the soft block. I was never the one who stopped the Judge Death. It's both. He doesn't have that weight on his shoulder, and therefore nobody would look at him at the same way, and nobody would accept him. And we see it in Sector House, where he's doing everything right, and like everybody's saying, "Oh, you're a fine judge on the street," but the mere fact that he's there is like, "Oh, yeah, I'm the law," and everybody's looking at him. No, you're not. You know, we've seen the law. The law is, you know, Judge Dredd. You're just a knockoff. You're a cheap knockoff. It's probably what it feels like to be like the son of a very famous actor is going into acting. I don't know, John Ford's dad. You know, when he just got into acting, everybody's like, "Who are you, brat? Walk off the studio."
Because they've tried it the other way, which is, you know, secretly replacing Dredd, because Kraken is the shadow in the background. Yeah, they tried to replace Dredd secretly. So to a certain extent with Rico, it's a bit more kind of trying to be open about it. But again, as you say, that just opens up so many questions of legacy and legitimacy and authority as well, doesn't it?
Yeah, you can give someone like Rico said, it's just a name, but it's not, because technically at this point they could, if something happens to Dredd, they could just take the helmet, put it on Rico, take the badge, and, you know, say, oh, okay, you're Dredd now. He has the chin. And if somebody asks, why is he so young? Oh, rejuve, right? Technically, it can work, except it wouldn't, because Rico is not Dredd. And he could never be, paradoxically, because he lived with Judge Dredd already existing. It's like that Philip K. Dick story, Minority Report, not the movie, the story where the fact that you know that you have knowledge of the future means that you will act differently. And therefore, the fact that Rico has Dredd to look up to and think, okay, this is what a judge should be, right? Changes how he behaves, how a judge should be. Rico can't be Dredd because of Dredd. That's the paradox. And Lawman is the smart one who looks at it saying, well, yes, I can't be Dredd. I can't be what they want me to be because the ultimate me is already there. I'm walking out, and then he just picks his bags and disappears.
But the whole thing,
years later,
the whole thing does beg an interpretation as being a treatise on free will. You know, effectively the same person in different circumstances, would they act differently? You know, is our destiny in our genes, etc., etc. And the way that Dolman is an analogy for that, for me, it just makes this collection so worth reading. Particularly as you say that last moment where he says, you know, I enjoyed it so much because it's in my blood, but I don't want to do it. My choice is to walk away. So it introduces a nuance to Dredd's character in that he's choosing to do this. It's not just how he's been conditioned.
Yeah, he keeps, like Rico said, because Rico is the one who particularly enjoys, oh, it's the greatest job in the world, right? Like, it's hard and dangerous and people all the time, it's the greatest job in the world. I couldn't imagine doing anything else. And Dredd is feeling that. There's the thing from The Devil You Know, where he looks at the city saying, oh, this city ate, hundreds of millions of crips and crooks and criminals, and then noise and pollution and death and destruction. God, I love it. And Lawman loves it too, and because he loves it, he understands it, and because he understands it in a way better than Dredd and Rico, we can say, no, it's an addiction in a way. What you're feeling is the high of addiction, and I have to cut it out, and I have to walk away because it's so good to me.
I mean, that's really interesting, particularly in the light of what you were saying about the article you wrote about whether Dredd is asexual, and whether we could ever actually know, and whether he's not driven by logic, he's not driven by any kind of rationality, but actually it's a kind of love, it's a kind of psychosis what he does, and whether is he just so much in love that he can't think of any other way to be.
Workaholic, yeah, to the extreme. He loves his job, but at the same time, I have my opinions about it, and as I wrote in the article, a lot of it is just a result of John Wagner not wanting to write relationship into the strip, and saying it straight on in one of your interviews, saying, "Oh, I don't like writing relationships. It's very dull to me. So, this character can't be in a relationship by law. That's it, the end." But it became very interesting, especially when you take it into the consideration of the American action hero in the 70s and the 80s, the guy who's, his life is violence, and the wife and daughter are either non-existent or dead, death. They have to die so he can focus on his job, which is to kill people. Killing people is life. Loving people is death, because they have to die to motivate you. And Dredd is the nth expression of that. Oh, he can only kill, right? His life is violence, nothing else. He sleeps 10 hours. He sleeps 10 minutes a day, sometimes 5, and then he goes out and he shoots some more people. And one of the points of Brothers of the Blood is that he leaves his apartment and he goes to live in the Hall of Justice, and that's the last connection he had to something human, to his robot, to his housemate, to citizen. He's saying, I don't need that anymore. I can just go to sleep, wake up, shoot some more people, day in, day out.
I mean, for me, that's the watershed moment of the entire collection, is Leaving Rowdy, where within the collection of stories that is looking back to a very particular moment in Dredd history, he's giving that element up. As you say, he's throwing away Maria and Walter and all those stories when he was at home. Do you think that is a watershed? Do you think that is a moment when Dredd does, considering what then happens in Blood of Duty and the Satanist, that he tries to hang up the last vestiges of connection with the past, and then is forced to deal very specifically with the legacy of the past?
I wonder if it was planned. Like you said, Wagner, the way he writes, he could have planned that. He could have just say, he written Leaving Rowdy 8, and then a couple of months later say, Vienna, there's something there. It is a watershed moment, though. One of the things I love about Judge Dredd is that the watershed moments are often so understated. The other strip I almost wrote about the book is the one that nobody would expect it, is 21st Century Futsi, the one on the moon. Because it's a rather pointless strip, but there's one big element where they changed the year within the comic. And I don't know when it was decided that Dredd would follow 1 year in real time is 1 year in comic time, but it's there. And that for me is very important, because this introduced the concept of consequences. Everything matters. Time passes for these characters. We know specifically he started serving here, and now this is this year, and he has through these experiences. and it's a wonderfully understated moment of, okay, yeah, now we as readers know the time happened, while something like the other comic that takes place in 2099, which I think I wrote about in the book, Marvel 2099, a line of comics that ran for several years, and it's always 2099 specifically, and they relaunch it periodically, and it's now been 30 years later, and it's still 2099 cyberpunk future, and Dredd can change. So we have this.
I mean, that does feel an awful lot like time currently. It doesn't matter how many days seem to go by, we always seem to be stuck in the same month in 2020.
Oh, yeah. Oof, bringing us back to reality.
Well, yeah, absolutely, it's important. Well, look, we've talked as long as we said we would. So, if people want to find you online, where can they seek you out?
I'm at Twitter at Tom Shops, where I tweet often about Judge Dredd, sometimes about other things. I publish articles often about Judge Dredd, sometimes about other things, in Panel by Panel, the Comics Journal, twelfth, and Sequart. The book is called The Lawman. It's from Panel by Panel Press, as it were. You can buy it. You can order it through their website. It was Kickstarter only, and the Kickstarter is finished, but I think we should have some copies left, especially with the recent condition. So you can go to that website. You can ask around. You should probably find it. And that's me.
Well, thank you very much indeed to Tom. I hope you enjoyed that. It was great to dig down into a collection that I'd not read since it came out in 2006. Brothers of the Blood is available in digital from 2000 AD's web shop and apps. We're going to be back next week with another couple of episodes of the Lockdown Tapes. If you've not caught up on the previous episodes, please do so. We've got feature interviews with Brian Bolland, Carl Critchlow, Ian Kennedy, Mike Dorey, absolute veterans of the industry. And it's been a real pleasure to be able to chat away to them. And I hope it has brought a little bit of relief in these dark times. As I said, thank you so much for the feedback on these episodes. So until next time, Earthlets, as I said in previous episodes, stay safe, stay well, look after each other, and splundig verthrig.
Alert! 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 Fill power levels dangerously high. Alert! Alert! Read 2000 AD every week. Ask your comic book store or newsagent now. Subscribe to the galaxy's greatest comic at 2000ADonline.com.